Hi, Rob Browne here on this Monday morning, and Brendan's down in Ocala. We are expecting 2 or 3 inches of snow, maybe 5 inches tomorrow night and Wednesday up here in Memphis. But great time to be inside watching college basketball. What a Saturday we had. These Saturdays are getting to be as big as the football Saturdays. Auburn goes on the road, gets a 9-point win at Tuscaloosa, and Alabama had a 6th player, the woman who pushed Chad Baker-Mazara. What a story that is. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, lady. Hey, Florida fallout. Brendan was telling me some stuff. We talked about it on the Buddy Martin Show Thursday. Will Harris, defensive backs coach, leaving to go to Miami. What's happening is he's messing with the Gators recruiting, or he's going to try to. They had a top 10 class. We'll talk to Coach Ellis Johnson and Dave Tompkins about how that can actually happen.
Can that really happen? Because that's where, some people are saying no big deal. Some people are saying it's a big deal. You never know in this NIL transfer portal game. So
yeah, you don't. I mean, because the money that's being thrown around out there. So we're going to cover a lot of ground. Do yourself a favor. I got the hardest working, smartest producer on the planet, Brendan Martin, Wilton's son. Follow us on X at Rob Browne _ YouTube, Facebook. Take a picture with your phone to the QR code. You'll get an automatic ding every time we go live, whether it's the morning show, the Buddy Martin Show at night, a pop-up show we do. There's just a lot of things that we do on the channel. Our content king, and we appreciate you watching. Happy President's Day to all of you. Some of you are off today. Dave Tompkins from by corporate America. The man is back. The man from Mountain Brook who loves basketball. Coach Ellis Johnson. This is, man, we'll go ahead and get started. This is like going to that all-you-can-eat buffet at the Arlington Hotel in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and everybody loaded up their plate with 2 or 3 pounds of prime rib and every meat on the table, and we all being Catholics. Oh, God, it's Lent. We can't be eating that. So we had to go back to eggs and eggs,
Hog jows.
Yes, hog jows. By the way, in Park in Arkansas at the Friendly Market, you can buy hog jows. It's a lean cut up. Coach Johnson, you grew up in the country. Have you ever had hog jows before?
No.
They're actually a really good cut of pork. I recommend you try them with whiskey. It's really good stuff. But all right, I want to ask Coach this first. And we got a lot to cover, football and basketball. Will Harris, and we talked about it on the Buddy Martin Show. I got to be on there with him Thursday with Buddy and Franz and Ben. Will Harris leaves to take the secondary coaching job at Miami. And there's a lot of talk on social media that could affect, and it probably will, the Gators recruiting. You've been in a lot of recruiting battles. We know everybody is polite and courteous, and nothing's ever said that shouldn't be said about other schools or whatever. What do you think will play out? Because Billy Napier, you know him, seems like a guy who plans every minute of his day. He probably was a CPA or a mechanical engineer in his previous life.
Well, the movement usually a coach is getting more money or is getting a little more responsibility. If that's not the case, then it may have been, hey, why don't you go find another job? But you never know unless you actually get to the source themselves. Now, on the recruiting thing, that's always been a possibility.
Yeah.
It would depend on how heavily that coach was involved in their signing class and who they're recruiting right now or whatever. And a lot of times, if the head coach is not deeply involved in the recruiting process to the fact that he stays in communication with every prospect, and there are coaches who do that, they delegate a lot. And when you delegate a lot, those kids will sometimes have a little more allegiance to the recruiter or the assistant coach than maybe the head coach. But it's I wouldn't put too much stock in it. I just don't see it. I mean, I don't think he's going to evaporate Florida's recruiting class. It may be a kid that he was closely tied to that will want to follow him, but I'd say that's about the end of it.
Yeah, and I just think Florida recruits itself. That it's just being a fan of a rival school, Dave. Wouldn't you agree? If you can't
Absolutely.
recruit at Florida, it's because you're not trying.
I mean, who doesn't want to go to Gainesville? It's a momentum play right now, the way they finished out their season. You know, at the end of the season, I think they were one of the, 2 or 3 or 4 best teams in the SEC. All signs point upward. It's just a great time to be a Florida Gator, whether it's in football or basketball.
Yeah, it is. And, you look, Coach, at the football. I mean, basketball is getting big. I mean, we saw that game in Tuscaloosa. You lived in Tuscaloosa, 2 different tours of duty over there. I'd never seen Coleman Coliseum. Bruce Pearl said it too, even when he was coaching at Tennessee. The football thing, you're talking 85 scholarship players. It's a year-round deal. And basketball is too, but you're only talking 13 scholarship players. Hell, Tennessee's 5th in the country right now with 8 scholarship players. When we talk about coaches burning out in recruiting and all, with all these things like the NIL and the portal, which we're a sanctuary show. We're trying not to talk about them if we can. But Coach, talk about if you were a 35-year-old coach with 3 young children and a wife, what is it like day in and day out being an SEC coach with recruiting and the demands and the pressure that there is?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Great question. And I don't know if I'm the best person. I had my children real late in life. I didn't have my first child until I was 48 years old. And I wasn't scrambling quite as much at that time in my career. Yeah. But it was hard for young coaches who had young children, young families. One of the hardest things is when you have to make a coaching decision to move, take a promotion, or if the staff gets fired. And, I was there most of the time when that happened to me. I was single, and I actually moved a lot because I wanted to move, because I liked working with new staffs and so forth. But most coaches don't make those decisions with that. And that's a great question, and it takes a toll on people. I've always heard this expression, it takes a special woman to be a coach's wife. No, it takes a special man to be the husband of a coach's wife. Well, what I mean by that is that you better make sure you're doing your part within your marriage and spending time with your children. And it's a hectic and chaotic job in many ways. But if you're not spending time with your family, that's a personal choice. And you need to probably address that yourself.
Yeah. And Dave, we talk on this show every day about sports, and sometimes we do forget about the people behind the stories. And, my brother-in-law was in the Marine Corps 26 years. And, some of you're a drill instructor at Parris Island. They only let you do it for 24 months consecutively. And I had a friend going through boot camp one time at Auburn. His grades slipped a little bit, and his parents recommended the winter workout program at Parris Island. And he said his drill instructor about 3 weeks in told him, he said, guys, I'm going to take my hat off, kind of talk to y'all freely here in the chow hall. And he did. And he goes, let me tell you something. I leave y'all, at the end of every day, I got to go home, take this hat off and wipe my face off and be daddy to 4 kids under 7 years old. He goes, I can't be going, what is your malfunction? Why aren't you drinking your milk? So, Dave, you being in the Army, and again, happy Veterans Day, President's Day, and thank you again for being back with us. We have missed the hell out of you.
Well, when I was serving during the Cold War, tours of duty were 3 years. Now tours of duty are 18 to 24 months. I think that's a positive adjustment. I mean, the burnout factor is so high. Switching that, from military service to even last night watching the SNL 50, which I thought was great. I think there's a strong, almost a direct one-to-one correlation between the quality of the entertainment product and how much work has to go into making that entertainment product. So SNL, I think, case in point, but also SEC football. SEC football is the most entertaining product in football, in sports, I think. I maybe with a close second, March Madness, and how much work is required to be a head coach, an assistant coach, any kind of coach in the SEC. I mean, it is a 24/7, 365 kind of job. And, the result of it is a tremendously entertaining product. And so all of us are so grateful that we get to watch it, that we get to talk about it, every day of the week at 8 Central from the cave in Arkansas, So, hats off to the coaches and thank them for their service as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, breaking news here from Brendan Martin, and this is Florida is hiring Deron Wilson to coach cornerbacks. Wilson spent 2022 with the Gators in Gainesville, and I agree with what you just said, Dave. That's a brilliant point. 18 to 24 months. Wow, that's a quick turnaround to be in and out, but it's life changing in a positive way. Coach, by chance, do you know Deron Wilson, the coach that Billy Napier just hired to be on his staff?
No, I don't think I do.
Okay. Well, Coach, here's another question. One of my friends told me when Bobby Petrino left to go to Louisville after 1 year at Auburn, and then they tried the Nalsminger offense, and then Tommy Tuberville hired a new offensive coordinator, Al Borges. He brought in Al Borges from Indiana, Big Al. And then rather than just, hey, I've hired him, the story was he had his current staff of offensive coaches sit down and talk with, kind of interview Al Borges to make sure it was a good fit. And it turned out to be a great fit. They went 13-0 his first year, won 41 games those next 4 years. Do you like that way of doing it? Because you have been a head coach, you've been a coordinator, you have coached with a lot of the legends of the game. Dave, this guy has coached with, I think, the greatest defensive mind ever, Brother Bill Oliver from Epps, Alabama.
Well, unfortunately, I was at Mississippi State when Al was at Auburn. And he is a great guy. But that 14-0 season, we were one of the 4 teams. So they had 2 running backs, it was so great and everything. But he did a really good job. Tommy had about 4 or 5 years in there where he was a lot of turnover on his staff. Some of it because guys were getting head coach opportunities. Some of it, I think he was just making adjustments. He brought in one of the guys that was in that run and shoot type thing. Or air raid, I don't know what you call it. But didn't work out well. And I think he left after a year. But Al did a great job, and he was a really good guy. I think the first time I met him, we used to have to go to this SEC orientation if it was your first year in the SEC. And although I'd already been at Alabama twice, they still made me come over there and do that thing when I came back to Mississippi State. So I'm not sure who was in charge of that, but that's when I first met him. And we got to spend a little time together, and occasionally I'll get a text or something from him. And but he was a really good football coach.
Yeah, and Dave, I think that's cool. That I didn't know that you had to do a kind of welcome to the league or sort of an intro or whatever. But I'm big on the history, traditions, and heroes of everywhere.
I like that approach. I like the group interview approach that was discussed just prior. My business is investing in startups. And so what I do now, I've learned the hard way, is that when I'm looking at a startup, one of the elements of my due diligence process is to have other founders in my portfolio interview the founder who's looking to raise money. One of my most colossal failures was one where the founder just didn't fit in with the rest of the portfolio. He just didn't get along, and there was an underlying character issue. And guy was brilliant, and ended up his company failed. There was probably some fraud on the way out and whatnot. And I've sort of decided right then and there is that I'm going to have this group interview process going forward. And I like that approach in football. I mean, there's got to be a cultural fit. It doesn't matter how X and O talented a coach is. If there's not a cultural fit, it's just not going to work. We're all old enough now to learn that lesson time and time again, the hard way.
Yeah. And Coach, speaking of what Dave just said, we keep hearing that the kids today, you can't coach them hard. I mean, I have 3 plus 1 on the remarriage, Mallory, 2 boys, 2 girls. I'm even tougher on them because I hear crap like that. and my kids are about the same age as yours, Coach. And I'm sitting here going, you're crazy not to be tough on them. I mean, but your kids have grown up around pressure and seeing what coaching is like and everything like that. I think that's an advantage for you. I bet your kids are outstanding in whatever they do. I've already talked to you about them, but they've grown up. They're like going, hey man, 5 o'clock wake up call, ain't nothing to it.
Yeah, my kids are like everybody else's kids. Everybody that meets them thinks they're wonderful until they come home.
Yeah.
And they won't listen to me about anything.
Yeah. Well, I know the feeling.
This thing about coaching players differently today, I don't really think that's true. There may be kids that are making decisions based on that, but they're not ones that are successful. That's the ones that are bouncing 2 or 3 programs and playing 6 games a year. Most of the other guys, they're being just as demanding on them. I know one thing that has changed since I've been out is those postseason interviews. And I would think that would be difficult because you used to not have to discuss money. Now that's a big part of it with them. And you're trying to tell them what they need to do to improve. And they need to know because they're not complete players yet. They're 18, 19 years old. And you're trying to tell them the things you want them to improve on, the things they did great, yada, yada, maybe a position move next year. I wouldn't mind hearing if they had some schools they might have in mind, but when they start talking about pay and salaries, it really would. It'd be a brand new world. And that's why I think you see a lot of these schools hiring these GM positions now so they can get a clarity on what the kitty looks like and how we're going to do this with these kids because it's a puzzle now. Then you can, I guess, take a lot of the tension out of it. But that would be strange. Talking to a college kid, first thing out of his mouth is, what can I make next year?
Yeah.
Outside of sports, one positive trend I'm seeing in leadership, and I'll now sort of correlate it to sports, is the criticality of leadership in the locker room, the player leadership, the team's ability to lead itself in the absence of the coaching staff. I'm certainly seeing that in the startup world, where if the founder's out on the West Coast raising money, the Nashville-based startup still has to run itself with the founder, in Silicon Valley trying to get some money for the startup. And you correlate that to sports, and there has to be leadership in the locker room for the team to be successful. I think that's a big question going forward for Alabama, and obviously there's going to be the first year vacuum with the departure of Coach Saban, but I think for the next administration to be successful, to sustain the success, it requires a great head coach, and I think they have a good head coach, but there has to be leadership in the locker room. I think that's just so critical, and I think the recognition of that, I believe, is going to be a positive trend going forward.
Coach, speaking of that, if a young coach came to you and said, hey, I've got an opportunity to be a head coach at an SEC school, just you pick the school, and he came to you and said, Coach, I'd like to meet with you and listen and get your guidance, what advice would you give to a new coach coming in today? Because you've got a hell of a lot in your savings bank of memories. You've seen a lot. No one's ever seen it all, but you've seen a lot.
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. But when you say, what would I give them today? I don't know if I could get into how it is today, because it has changed a bunch. But the biggest thing, my 2 boys think they want to coach. And I keep cautioning them. They were born, I was 30 years into my coaching profession. They didn't see the early years. And, they were born into a 5 or 6 bedroom house and daddy making all kind of money. And they get to go to all these exciting games and all that kind of thing. But I wanted to make sure they didn't think that's what coaching was, because it's not. And most players who try to flip it over, they're shocked how much time the coaches are putting in compared to what they used to put in when they were a player. And the players put in a bunch of time too, but they don't have a clue how demanding it is time-wise. And some of them can't handle it. They really just don't. They can't deal with the day-to-day grind, and that's, a lot of jobs are like that. You don't see the underpinning. You don't see what everybody's doing. How can they pay this guy to go out there and stand on the sideline for 12 weeks? Well, he's not standing on the sideline for 12 weeks. He's busting his hump for 360 days. And most of the time they're getting paid not for what they're doing right then, but for what they've done the last 15 years of their lives. So, yeah, it's a good question, Rob. And that's the best thing I've had to relate it to is before my boys went into it, I tried to tell them, this is what you don't understand about it. Now you go ahead and give it a try. And I've really been pleased. The older one is already a graduate assistant, and he seems to really love it. And I'm not surprised because he was always one that immediately made friends and had a good cohesion with his teammates. And that's what it kind of is. I mean, one of the biggest things you enjoy as a young coach, because you're not making a lot of money. You're working your buns off and you're not making much money at all. And one of the things you enjoy is you're around a bunch of guys who like the stuff you do. And you just keep feeding off of that. And it may be true in business too. I mean, I wouldn't know. But if you like what you're doing, you're going to do a better job of it. And you're going to work harder at it.
There's this great it's a lecture about how to live an asymmetric life, and so how to be a one percenter. And the guy giving the lecture, he says it comes down to these four simple things: do hard things, just commit yourself to doing hard things. Do your thing though. Make sure it's your thing that you're doing. Choose what's worth suffering for. Be willing to do it for a long time, a minimum of 10 years, and write your story. And coaches, the successful coaches, I mean, they embrace the hard. They're comfortable with it. They live within it. They have a shared culture with the other coaches that embrace the hard. And, there's no such thing as an overnight success, particularly in coaching. It's an 18-year, it's a 23-year overnight success. And I think Coach Johnson just made a great point about those young assistant coaches that just love what they're doing and, are willing to put up with the 80-hour work weeks for very little pay and a lot of thankless stuff. But that's what's required. And that's, everyone, young and old needs to understand that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've got a friend whose son-in-law he just finished his first year as an orthopedic surgeon. He was almost 34 before he ever made more than $45,000 a year. And I'm talking, 4 years undergrad, 4 years medical school, 5 years in as a resident, 1 year as a fellowship. And in between that, he had to do a year before he got into medical school on the wait list as a scribe. So people, they don't realize, and John Brady is on this show almost every week with us talking basketball, took LSU to the Final Four in 2006. He's from Macomb, Mississippi, down near Brookhaven, not too far from Galesburg, where Leonard Skinner tragically went down October of 1977. But he said, Rob, my first 3 years in coaching, I made $15,000 a year. And that's, you talk about equity that's built up. Coach, that's a great point. You're being paid for what you've done in the previous 15 or 20 years. In financial markets, that's like embedded capital gains. So you have to think about stuff like that. I love it. All right, I want to start going down a list here with both of y'all. Kind of play tennis. I like tennis. I don't play pickleball. I don't like hitting pickles with a tennis racket. But I want to ask y'all both. You look at the SEC right now. Basketball is hotter than a ghost pepper right now. Football is always the big thing. It's what pays the bills. I love them both, and baseball is getting started. But I want to go through the schools, and I'm going to ask you first, Coach. The top 4 schools right now that you think are positioned financially to work through what we have to work through, because again, then you never know when some booster you've never heard of decides, like Larry Ellison spending $10 million plus on the quarterback at Michigan. I knew he was the CEO and the founder of Oracle, but Coach, who are the top 4 schools in the SEC going into next year you think are positioned best to win based on everything that you know? Because you've been at a number of schools and can speak with a lot of
Now,
gravitas.
you mean just this financial thing with NIL? Do you mean roster
financial, fan base, roster,
gosh,
everything? That's a loaded baked potato question. How about just roster wise?
Wow. And I don't keep up with the rosters a whole lot because I never have enjoyed following recruiting. And now with this damn portal, I mean, you just don't know. I wait and get one of these summer magazines to see who's on what teams because they're still moving around in April and May. But I think you have to start with starting successful quarterback. And when you do that, I know he didn't have a great year this year, but the kid at Tennessee is a good player. Lagway at Florida. And then who was one I can't spit out right now, Nussmeier at LSU. And that could go on. But I think you start there, and then you start comparing who's got the most help for those guys. And fan bases are important, but there are only 3 or 4 schools in the conference that don't have an unbelievable fan base from the standpoint of the atmosphere in the stadium and the loyalty and the financial support. So I don't think any school separates themselves in that conference financially that much. Some of them don't care as much and don't get into the thing quite as much. But I've learned the hard way as a defensive coordinator. Start looking at quarterbacks, and if you hadn't got one, you can have a hell of a roster. You're probably going to lose 3 or 4 games.
Totally agree.
If I'm going to buy and hold, I'm going to take half my portfolio, my net worth, little as it is, and I'm going to put it on Texas. I mean, just because of the resources that they have. I think Arch Manning's going to have a breakout year. They've got a great coach. I'm putting half of it on Texas, and if I can go outside the SEC, I'm going to put a bunch on Ohio State as well. As much as I don't want to, I don't want to put money on Ohio State or Michigan, but I'm going to put it on Texas, and I think I'm also going to put it on Georgia just because of Kirby Smart. But to Coach Johnson's point, when you got the incumbent quarterback coming back, whether it's Lagway at Florida, Nussmeier at LSU, Nico, I can never pronounce Nico's last name at Tennessee. There you go. Thank you. Yeah, they're poised for really breakout years. Obviously, being an Alabama fan, I'm very curious as to see what year 2 is going to look like. I have very very fond memory, or not fond memories of Coach Bryant passing in '83, and us waiting until 2007. And the arrival of Coach Saban. That was a long period. Obviously, we had the 1 year with Coach Stallings in '92, but that was kind of it. And certainly, I won't live long enough to have to wait that long again. But so I'm curious about Alabama. But I guess as an investor, I would be most bullish on Texas.
Yeah, and to think, Coach, you were there at Alabama 7 years. Coach Stallings was there back in the 11-game era, and they won 70 games. A national championship in '92. Once your mind goes from here out to here, it never reverts back to here that comfortably. And that's true with fans. I mean, good God, the SEC, the Big Six, Auburn, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, and LSU in football have won the SEC or the national championship in the last 62 years. It's been one of those 6 schools, and only those 6. I want to flip to basketball because both of y'all know your sports really well. You look at what's happened in the SEC, and Coach, you were here when Mike Slive issued the edict to, hey, let's get basketball going. And a lot of schools, football is so big, and then there's recruiting, and then there's spring practice. There's not enough time, it seems like, for some of the fan bases to really get into basketball. But you got Kentucky has won, 8 national championships. Florida has won 2. Arkansas has won 1. And outside of that, nobody in the SEC has done it. Coach, when you were looking over the weekend, you look at Clemson, they beat Florida State. They have been hit in the head with a 2x4 in all sports, and they can't seem to recover. But looking at the SEC race, Coach, and a year ago, South Carolina was rolling, and now they're winless. It's hard to believe LSU has won 2 games in the conference. Arkansas's won 4. But, Coach, watching SEC basketball, and you've grown up in the South, is this the best season, best group of teams you've ever seen? I mean, you had a 1 versus 2 matchup at Coleman Coliseum Saturday between Auburn and Alabama, and that's never happened in the SEC before in basketball.
Yeah, I think what you see is a more full conference, if you will. There are more teams in the SEC now that can play on the national scene in the top 20. Just look at the poll. But there were times where an SEC school was dominating the league and maybe had about 12 other schools in the conference that couldn't even play with them. It was kind of strange. When I came to Alabama, Wimp was really having a better run than Alabama had in football. And it was a lot of turmoil on the football side, but Wimp was winning. He'd been Sweet 16. I think he got to Elite 8. Yeah. And they were pretty doggone good, and they were fun to watch. And I would bet the atmosphere in Coleman during those times with Wimp was about as good as anything Bruce Pearl saw the other day.
Think about that team that Wimp had with Robert Ory, Latrell Sprewell, and James Hollywood Robinson. And, it's just a total crime that they only got to the Sweet 16. Back in Wimp's era, when Wimp was coaching, he was number 2 behind Dean Smith in terms of putting players in the NBA. And, and then prior to him with CM Newton, back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, I mean, the SEC was putting a lot of players in the NBA. Obviously, Kentucky was good. LSU had some Final Four runs with Dale Brown that would to watch Dale kind of implode the team in a big game. I think the big difference now between now versus back then is that the coaching is so good in SEC basketball. The SEC has so many great basketball coaches. I mean, that was certainly on display Saturday at Coleman Coliseum. I mean, Bruce Pearl is an iconic coach. I mean, he is a Hall of Fame coach. I thought it was a pretty interesting stat at the beginning of the game. The last time a number 1 and a number 2 team faced each other during the regular season was in 2008. And who was the winning coach that one? It was Bruce Pearl when he was coaching at Tennessee. He beat John Calipari at Memphis. And that's been Coach Pearl. Nate Oates is a great coach. Todd Golden. There's just you look at Ole Miss. I mean, there's just so many great coaches in the SEC, and I think that's why the SEC has always been able to recruit in basketball. Birmingham, Memphis, all hotbeds of high school basketball. But now they have great coaches. I mean, really great coaches, and I can't wait for the tournament. I'm not even that interested. In the SEC tournament, I know, although y'all will be having fun in Nashville as you always do, I might have to make that pilgrimage. But I can't wait for the NCAA tournament because I just think the SEC is just going to dominate. When I look outside the SEC, the only teams that really scare me are Houston, possibly St. John's, possibly Michigan State, but that's about it. I mean, and Duke, of course, but. Otherwise, it's the SEC. I mean, they are just. I mean, it's just what a juggernaut.
Yeah, and I think about this. I'm going to say something about our sponsors. First off, real quick, we're going to come right back. Winter Timber Outdoors in Athens, Alabama. They are open every day of the week, folks. The shooting sports and everything that I do, if it swims, flies, crawls, or runs, I'm going after it, and I can cook it too. You can get everything you need at Winter Timber. They've got several thousand shotguns, rifles, and handguns on stock in the store. And they got a competent staff that knows what they're doing. Just go to the website. Look at all the gear they've got. Great looking Sitka, Dixie decoys, deer stands, the food you need for your food plots, ammunition, boots, hats, rain gear, everything for the outdoor life. They're going to grow in the footprint that is the Southeastern Conference, okay? They're breaking ground back in November on the new store in Auburn. They're looking at a place in Fayetteville right now. They're looking in Athens, Georgia. Something hopefully soon will be said about a location. They want to build one in Memphis. So look for Winter Timber Outdoors. Proud to be associated with them as they grow in the SEC. Take a picture of the QR code They've got lots of opportunities for you to be buy the best gear, but also get what you need. Winter timber.
A little bit of Savant Monday here on President's Day. I think Athens, Alabama is the home of Wilbur Jackson, number 80, the running back for Alabama and the wishbone back in the 70s. I know it's the home of okay, you're right.
Ozark,
I know
Alabama.
It's the home of Brittany Howard of Alabama Shakes, I thought she was brilliant last night singing the Sinead O'Connor song on the Saturday Night Live special. But
also the home of Freddie Smith, who played linebacker at Auburn 76 through 79. Freddie had 113 touchdowns in high school. And Coach and Dave, y'all remember former NC State quarterback Phillip Rivers. Apparently he was from Athens, Alabama, and Auburn and Alabama thought he was a tight end or maybe a linebacker or something. But, hey, you can't get them all right, I can say that. But, I mean, Athens, Alabama is a cool town, right next to Huntsville.
That's a beautiful area up there, too, all the lakes and everything.
It is.
I used to enjoy going up there to our functions and stuff.
Well, and also that's not too far from Town Creek, Alabama, home of Terrence Lynch, Chris Good, Antonio Lang.
The 27 Goods that played for Alabama.
I mean, that is there's something in the water there. Coach, hey, by the way, Dave, we're going to get back to basketball in a second, but Dave, Coach sends me a lot of cool texts and emails. I mean, he is I'm telling you, man, you're savvy with this social media. Rock Hill, South Carolina. I mean, it's unbelievable. 26 players have gone on to play in the NFL from Rock Hill, South Carolina, Coach. It was the reel you sent me the other day, including Jadeveon Clowney, who you recruited?
I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but the reason actually somebody sent that to me. I'm good at passing things on, but the reason I knew that they did a special on it a few years ago, and they actually did a team of the decade or a team of the century or something, and it was crazy. They asked me to come up there and we did a little short on the radio or whatever with one of the local high school coaches. But it really is. I mean, it's like the football capital of the world per capita. That was the big thing. It's not a real big town. But it's a lot of rivalry between the schools because when Clowney and Gilmore, their school was the newest one. When they split that school off and created 3 high schools, they literally had kids on each side of a street, one going one school and the other one going the other. And there was recruiting going on and tampering and all that. And the coaches involved, used to all coach together at one of the schools. It was a powerhouse. And then they split up and all that. But every time I'd go up there, there'd be another private investigator involved or something else. It's a unique place in that respect. It really is.
Yeah, and it is cool. I just think these towns like Baton Rouge and Mobile, Detroit, I think those 3 cities per capita have put more players in the NFL than anywhere. I want to get back to, and you talked about Winifred E. Wimp Sanderson from Florence, Alabama. When I was in college, that Sonny Smith, Wimp Sanderson battle was incredible. Norm Sloan was at Florida. Every time he'd stand up on the bench at the Auburn games, everybody would go, "Sit down, Norm." But basketball was wild then. And I think about, Coach, you're right, that atmosphere at Coleman Coliseum, the Plaid Palace, Wimp Sanderson put that on the map, man. Back, and when I got in TV, 89 and 90, working in Columbus, I mean, Alabama was rolling. And isn't Robert Ory from Andalusia, Alabama? And they had another great player from Aberdeen, Mississippi. But, that game Saturday, the atmosphere in Tuscaloosa with Nate Oates and Alabama, the crowd, it was insane. That was big time. That's the best atmosphere, wildest crowd that I've seen in Tuscaloosa.
And speaking of great teams that should have gone further than they did, think of that early 80s Wimp team with Enos Watley from Phillips High School in Birmingham and Bobby Lee Hurt from Huntsville and Buck Johnson from, I think, Jackson Olin in Birmingham. I mean, that was a dominant team, but they once again couldn't do anything in the tournament. But I'm real curious about what team in the SEC not named Alabama, Auburn, Tennessee, or Florida, and Kentucky, the ones expected to make deep runs. I think someone else in the SEC is going to make a deep run. Who's that going to be? My pick right now would be Ole Miss, just because of their coach. But I think I'm more curious about that than anything. Although I do want to see Auburn, even though I'm an Alabama guy, I do want to see Auburn go all the way and win the national championship, because this is their year to do it.
Well, if it ain't Alabama, they could be, or Florida. Florida's a team that scares the crap out of me as a fan because of their depth and their size. Coach, you know people, you know psychology. Do you have a degree in psychology, or didn't Steve Spurrier have a sports psychologist that he worked with in terms of motivation? Is there, because there's only so much you can say to get a team revved up before a game, but man, what Bruce Pearl said to Auburn before that game, I thought was apropos to the situation. Act like you're number one. We are number one. You got to play like it. But man, the atmosphere. I have respect for my rivals. Some of the fans are a little bit like the woman that was pushing Chad Baker Mazzara. I don't know what was said between them. He may have said, "Excuse me, ma'am." I don't know what he said to her, but that was pretty funny. If Letterman was still around, he would probably have her on the show as a guest with Chad Baker Mazzara on the couch. But Coach, you probably, when you watch these games and you looked at that atmosphere in Tuscaloosa, Nate Oates can coach and Bruce Pearl can coach. Pearl's the only coach in the history of college basketball to win 2 1-versus-2 matchups as the road team coach. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that really is. I'll tell you a funny story, not a funny story, but a neat story about Bruce. When he got in trouble at Tennessee and they fired him, and he went to work for a guy who's a Citadel graduate, and he's in some kind of food distribution business.
That's right.
And name's Bill Sampson. But he worked in an area around Clemson, Seneca, and was coming down there. And one of my buddies that grew up in Seneca owned a bunch of these convenience store service stations called Bounty Land. And he was supplying that and got to meet him. And so he ended up kind of coming part of the community. I wasn't living up here then, but he would come down sometime and he'd make sure and stay a couple of days and play golf with all of them. I mean, I'm not surprised he's a great recruiter.
Yeah.
By that story alone. And then when I was at Auburn, that's when they hired him. And after he'd been out several years, and got to spend a little. He had a small group of boosters, about 25 of them over at the stadium one night, and we got to hang around and have some personal time, just chat with him and stuff. And I brought that up to him about it. My buddy that owned those stores, and he said, "Oh, you mean Bubblehead? Yeah. How's David doing?"
That's awesome.
I said, Bubblehead's doing great.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Every day at work, the late dentist, Dr. Ed Weiner in Memphis, I was telling the story last week, he would be down in the deli at the Forum when I worked at Duncan Williams. Dr. Weiner is a legend. He's in the Hall of Fame, Tennessee basketball, SEC legends from Brooklyn. And Dr. Weiner, he was very close friends with Bruce Pearl, very close. And he would every day, he'd go, "Robbie, hang in there." He goes, "It's going to get better. It's going to get," he goes, "It'll take him a little time, but when he gets going, you're going to love him." He goes, he's my boy, Bruce. And he kept telling me to just hang in there. And I said, "I will. I believe. And it's just, I mean, Coach, that's a cool story about him. And I'd heard and I'd read about Pearl being in the food brokerage business and those, you talk about having relationships. Now we've lost Coach. Coach, come in. Mayday. I don't know where Coach went. He's got to be out there somewhere. But all these coaches' stories. Remember when Tuberville was out of coaching for a year, Tubby's Catfish Cabin or whatever. He sold catfish out of a food truck. And you think about this, like Nate Oates. Nate Oates, not too long ago, was high school coach outside of Detroit. Nate Oates can coach his ass off. And I'll tell you another one was former director of operations for basketball under Bruce Pearl, Todd Golden at Florida. We know Cal can coach. Chris Jans, Mississippi State.
He can coach.
You've been to a game or two at the Hump, and Chris Beard. I'm looking around this league, and Mark Pope in his first year at Kentucky, Rodney Terry in Texas, take them out. Porter Mosier, who won big in the Final Four at Loyola.
He and Sister Jean took Loyola Chicago to the Final Four.
Yeah, he did. When Sister Janine, we believe she is still living, would be 107. I wonder if she knows. You know who I wonder if she knows? Mildred. They may sun together at the beach. I don't know. But all right, another question on this SEC basketball race. Coach, when you look at having been at universities, you've met with presidents and athletic directors, you've been there. Is it hard to have a great basketball program and a great football program? Because historically, there are only 5 or 6 schools that are in the top 25 all-time wins in college football and college basketball. And Texas is one of those schools, Coach. And could you imagine being at a school like Texas? And this is a question, a loaded question. Can you have too much money and too many resources at your disposal to where it's kind of overwhelming if you don't know how to have some structure?
No, I don't think you can have too much.
Okay.
Now, what you can have is too many wealthy people meddling.
Yeah.
If they can't leave the board alone, leave the president alone, the AD, et cetera, right on down the line.
Yeah.
You can't have things done by committee. You got to have the proper chain. It's got to be in line. The alignment a lot of these pro teams talk about. There's evidence of it. But I do think that sometimes, I tell you, some of this SEC thing right now and Big Ten, they're dominating the top 25. A lot of that spillover money from football. They're the wealthiest schools. They get the most revenue. They're probably getting all these great coaches because they're paying them more than they used to 30 years ago. But that's just a part of it. But, you can't have too much resources. Now, you can misuse them and create problems, but I just think more money, the more advantageous.
Yeah, and let me say something real quick. I agree with that. Speaking of money and resources and a great dealership, LandersFordMemphis.com. They have the resources to go out and buy the biggest inventory in the Mid-South, Ford cars, trucks, and SUVs. Also a pre-owned lot as well, of a lot of really good vehicles. Brad Bellamy, the general manager, is such a good man. He was on our show. He's on every Friday with us, takes time out to join us. Also, Kenny Myers is out there at Landers, folks. You know him. You went to Christian Brothers. You know Kenny Myers. They ought to have a statue of that guy out there. He's as good as it gets. 41 years in the business. It's President's Day, folks. A lot of y'all are off today. Happy President's Day. I know a lot of you have been reveling and raising hell and having parades. It's President's Day. It's an exciting day. Probably most of you are at the grocery store if you live in the Mid-South, getting geared up for a winter storm coming here in about 48 hours. Landers Ford, those F-150s. I drive an F-150 4x4. I don't get stuck, folks. I got those all-terrain tires on there. The service department. Keep this in mind. If you got to take your vehicle in for service, they will pick you up, round-trip transportation. Great folks. If you didn't buy your last vehicle from LandersFordMemphis.com, you probably paid too much. And they're right down the street from our good friends at Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company. Folks, I got the turtle box right here. These turtle boxes, you can get them at Hewlett and Dunn. You can drop
on the square.
In the water. Yeah, you can drop them in the water, okay? And they don't get wet. I dropped mine in the water 3 times trout fishing back this summer, and it goes down, it comes right back up and rolls. They've got Filson, Barber. They got a 50% off sale going on right now. A lot of Pendleton, Schaefer, Filson, Barber, STS, Duckheads. I mean, the Maury Gaston collection of Duckheads. They've got more Duckheads than I've seen anywhere since that field I passed last night with several thousand ducks.
Except for Maury's closet.
Yeah, that's right. And they got boots, men's and women's boots, luggage, Filson luggage, STS luggage, Old South, Devil Dog jeans. You looking for some great looking clothes for you, for your wife, for your kids, They've got stuff for the little kids. They've even got little kids' boots, everything. Charles Hall, Raven, Laura, JM, Lydia, Squidward. They got a great staff on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee. And if you need a new roof, don't forget about mytownroofing.com. Corey Carter, Major Fusel, Chris Fiedler, all the great folks there. They put the roof on the cherry farm, did it in less than 48 hours. It took them about 33 hours, and it was cleaner than it was before they cooked. So look, let's get rolling. My producer's telling me let's get back on sports. He's right. It's when your mind is like mine. It's like, holy cow. All right. So Dave, let's throw it for you. When you look at this SEC basketball race, at the top right now, Auburn, Alabama, Florida, you got Missouri, you got Texas A&M. The team that scares the hell out of me, not because of their size, because Florida has that taken up, that's Texas A&M. I don't think there's a better coach in America who gets 50 pounds out of a 10-pound sack more often than Buzz Williams, who, by the way, Brooks Brothers, talk about an NIL deal, should talk with him about bringing back the three-piece suit.
They've got a perfect team for March.
God, it's scary.
They got guards win in the tournament. They've got great guards. They're all experienced guards. They've been there. They've experienced success and failure in March, and I think they're set up beautifully for March. I really see them minimum Sweet 16, likely perhaps Elite Eight, perhaps Final Four. I agree with you. Yeah, sure. Florida's kind of the glamour pick because of their size and their great guard play, but Texas A&M has just got a team that's just built for March. Go out to Boise or Spokane and play, and then get the Sweet 16, and just I don't know. I'm really bullish on them coming up into next month.
I am too. And Coach, I love having you on here. You know football, but you know basketball, you know sports, and you carry a lot of weight when you talk about it. If you're looking at a team in the SEC right now, of those, I think the NCAA puts out who they think their number one seeds are. They put them out Saturday. You had Auburn, Alabama, Florida, and Duke. And by the way, is there a team that's more vilified, Coach, than the University of New Jersey at Durham, the Duke Blue Devils? I have nothing against them. I mean, David Cutcliffe coached there. They can't be bad. Bad.
I saw Clemson beat Duke the other night on TV, and I don't watch a lot of basketball anymore. But I can't get that out of my head. I don't think Duke has a number one seed team this year. I think they've got one really good player, and then they've got some other guys who are coached extremely well. I don't know. I just didn't see – when I watched Alabama and Auburn, I thought I saw more athleticism. I thought I saw more balanced teams. Clemson's a hell of a defensive team. Browning does a lot better job. People don't give him enough credit. They're always good on defense. But I just can't get that picture out of my mind. I just don't see Duke going that deep.
Yeah. That's a good point.
I agree. Unfortunately, I got to jump in a second. I think Duke has a great coach in Shire. I think it was a perfect succession from Coach K to John Shire. I think Duke is another one, buy and hold. But to Coach Johnson's point, I don't think this is their year. I mean, they've got the Cooper Flagg guy who's, he'll be a one and done. But I don't think they have the athletes that you see across certainly the SEC, but also the Big 12.
Yeah. All right, Dave, I know you got to roll. Let's do it again next week. I am so glad to have you back. It makes America a better place. Make America great again with Dave Tompkins, okay?
There we go.
Take care. All right, Coach, wrapping it up here, executive producer Brendan Martin. And, Coach, let me ask you something. When you look at what's going on right now with basketball, football, don't you think as we become a sanctuary show, we're talking more about the games and the players and stuff like that? I think people are shifting back. I mean, there's going to be talk about guys getting this or that, but I wish you were still coaching because my dad retired officially at 90. and he's 96, and he's watching this right now, and he said, ask Coach Johnson this question right now. Is Coach Johnson still working out every day and still active? Because you're sharp as a 25, 30-year-old. That's maybe it's because you've got young kids. That's my parents have always said, have friends older than you, have friends your age, and have friends younger than you. That way you're always running around after something.
Well, that I'll tell you, it's something to have kids that age. You kind of have to keep up with certain things that are going on, or you can't even communicate with them.
That's right.
But that's about the extent of it. There are a lot of things. I remember I used to go there. Excuse me. There are little league games, and I'd sit around with all these 40-year-old women and thinking, man, this, you know. Then I'd go home and look in the mirror and like, what happened to me? But there are some positives and negatives to it. Having them so late, I had more patience. I had more money and was able to provide for them better. I wasn't moving every year or two as much as I had previously. So there were some things that worked out well, but there's some other things that are, there's a reason you usually have them when you're younger. So it goes both ways, but it's been something I think where I've had to kind of keep up with some of the latest stuff, or I can't even talk to them.
Well, no, I didn't know what Venmo was. I didn't know what texting was for a while. Your kids the learning curve speeds up. But I got to tell you, man, but you're still very active because you look great. I mean, like Brendan said, you got movie star hair. You're just an energetic, high speed guy, and I would love to see. And the Buddy Martin Show, check it out Monday through Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern on this channel. Buddy is a great sports writer, and he gets great writers on this show, like Franz Beard. Tony Barnhart's on here with us a lot. Man, we had Kevin Skarbinski on the show Friday from Birmingham, Hall of Fame basketball writer, the only one ever in the state of Alabama. But let's do it again next Monday with you, Coach. You talking football, basketball, baseball, whatever. I love having you as part of this team, and keep sending me those cool reels, man, because both of us, repetition's the mother of all skill, man. So let me say, I'll let you go, Coach. We'll talk to you this week, but thanks for your time this morning. And folks, most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. Have a blessed day. Share this show. And again, for executive producer Brendan Martin, who's the best in the business, and this team that we have, support our sponsors. Let them know you heard about it on Sidelines. And one last thing, happy President's Day. And if you're looking for a dog, Web Footed Kennel, Jonesboro, Arkansas. My good friend Chris Aiken is a great guy, the best training in America. See you in the morning, folks. Thanks for watching.